Hey, Brent Ehrler here with Tackle Warehouse, and I just got done with the Barnett event for the Bass Elites. It was kind of a tough tournament for me. I struggled on day one. I was in the 80s, and day two I caught them better. I moved up to the 50s, which was kind of nice. It was good to kind of be able to go in that direction instead of the other direction. But the conditions here, Barnett is really a shallow, stained water lake. There's a lot of shallow vegetation. There's milfoil, there's lily pads, there's gator grass, there's reeds, and really for me the combination of everything was key. I couldn't catch them in just pads, I couldn't catch them in just milfoil. It had to be a combination of several different grasses, and I don't know why, but that was definitely the case here, is fishing that combination of grass and shallow, and just finding the areas that had more fish was really the key. Because the water was stained, I went with a lot of whites for any of my search baits. I caught them on a spinner bait, I caught them on a swim jig, I caught them on a vibrating jig. Whites were the key. There's a little bit of shad spawn in the morning. The areas that had a lot of bait were the key, and you could tell because you get in and you'd be fishing around and the shad would be flicking on the surface. You could actually see them with your eyes swimming too. So when you got in those areas, it was a matter of time before you found the fish. I never found any one particular area where I caught fish and didn't see the shad. So for me, that was definitely the key, is finding the bait and then finding the fish. And really it was pretty basic, nothing real crazy. My spinnerbait setup, I went with a real light spinnerbait. This is a 3/8 ounce Boss spinnerbait, and I put the blades on there. I put 2 Colorado blades on there. This is one that I made myself, the skirt as well. Went with the bright white like that. What I rigged this on is 20-pound Sunline FC Sniper. I went with a Steez A reel, and then this is my Signature Series Tatula Elite. It's a 7-foot medium heavy rod, and I went with that lighter action rod. We actually call this the finesse rod. The reason I went with that is this is a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, and I was really making precise casts with this spinnerbait and even pitching it sometimes. Really, you could see where the bite would come from. So I would make a short cast or a short pitch, and you'd only turn the handle about 5 times before one would bite it. So I went with a little bit lighter rod. It has a real fast action to it, so it has a soft tip, has enough backbone. With that 20-pound test, I hooked every fish just fine. I didn't lose any in the pads or anything, but having that little bit lighter action rod with that 3/8 ounce spinnerbait was the key for this setup. So that was a spinnerbait. Then swim jig, this is a Boss swim jig. This is a 3/8 ounce swim jig, and I put a Kitech on that just because I wanted a kick tail. I threw a twin tail for most of the tournament. On the final day, I actually threw the kicking tail because I was catching them on a vibrating jig, and so I wanted something with a little bit more tail action instead of a twin tail. The twin tail I was using in the mornings to where I was fishing almost on the surface, and all the bites that I had, I saw them bite it. Later in the day, when the fish moved down a little bit, that's why I went with this kick tail. So 3/8 ounce. This I threw on a Tatula Elite. This is an Ishmonroe frog rod. This is a great swim jig rod, a lot of backbone to it. I threw this on 20-pound Sunline Shooter. Want a little bit heavier line for that. And I threw this on a Steez A as well as a spinnerbait. And so that was the basic setup for this. Same thing, a lot of precise casting, pitching, casting, finding little lanes in between the vegetation. In the mornings though, I was looking for the thicker stuff, and what I'd do is I'd cast beyond it, and I'd hold the rod tip up and fish it. I could see the swim jig the whole way. That's why the white was real key, is that you could see it in that stained water. And when I'd get to that thicker stuff, I'd crawl across the thicker stuff. A lot of them would hit it through the thick stuff almost like they would a frog. So that's what I did with that setup. Again, I had 2. I had one with a kick tail. It was actually a twin tail grub, and then the other one was that Kitech. So later in the day, keeping it lower, in the mornings, keeping it on the surface more. The other bait that I fished for a reaction bait, again, bright white was the key. You really wanted something bright in the stained water. I just threw a vibrating jig. This is the 3/8 ounce vibrating jig. This is a standard setup for me. My cranking rod, the Tatula Elite vibrating jig cranking rod. It's a 7.4 medium heavy. This is a really good vibrating jig rod. This is a really good crankbait rod. It's a glass rod. This is one that I designed for Daiwa. So 20-pound FC Sniper, and I put a Yamamoto Seiko on the back of that. That white and that water, it's amazing how much vibration this puts off. You can really see it with that Zaco with the bright white, how much action there really is with that. So it's pretty cool to have that combination. I probably caught most of my fish on this over the 2 days out of the other two. So that was the setup for the bite ready jig. And then the final bait, when I slowed down, I flipped and pitched a little bit, and this right here is a Yamamoto flapping hog. And one trick that I did is I left these on here to show you. I rarely fish the flapping hog just like this. What I do is I take it and I tear the top couple appendages off. That's how I fish it right there. I threw that on a 3/8 ounce Rains tungsten sinker, and I threw a heavy cover 4/0 Gamakatsu hook. And that's what I use for flipping. With this line, I put this on 22-pound shooter. I was fishing somewhat open water, but I want a pretty heavy line. I was pitching holes and pockets, so 22-pound Sunline shooter. And I put this on the Ishman Road Tatula Elite frog rod. I didn't need a 7.6 or an 8-foot flipping stick. I wanted something that I could cast a little bit and pitch, so I went with the frog rod. With this, I went with the Tatula SB reel and an 8.1 gear ratio. I really like that faster reel when I'm flipping or pitching or throwing any kind of bottom bait, because what happens is you pitch that bait into a shallow piece of cover, and when a fish bites it, I want to be able to take up as much line as I can to set the hook, especially if it's a spawning fish. If it's a fish on a bed, a lot of times you'll pitch to a pocket and you'll lift up and it's racing out, coming towards you. And so you have to take up a lot of line before you set that hook. So an 8.1 gear ratio reel. And that was my basic setup. So that's how it went down for me. Again, not a very successful tournament, but for me, moving from the 80s to the 50s was the right direction. And I salvaged points for the year, and you know, it could have been a lot worse. But all this stuff that you saw here today is available on tacklewarehouse.com. Just click on the links below and buy them up. They work.